Hi, everybody. This is John Kraska with EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. Thank you for joining the webinar today. It's one of in the series of training webinars for the Utah State Library. This one's on building the library coalition, which is going to go into a pretty deep dive about how coalitions function, what the opportunities are for libraries to become part of a coalition, to build, to start a library-focused coalition. We're going to take you through some of the high-level learnings that we've had at EveryLibrary, some of the supports that we've done over the years at the EveryLibrary Institute for library organizations about coalition work. All of our trainings for the Utah State Library and around the internet are rooted in two parts to our work. One is the 501c4 political action committee that is called EveryLibrary. We work on library funding initiatives. The other is our 501c3 public policy, tax policy, education policy research institution, the EveryLibrary Institute. These trainings are sponsored by the Utah State Library with our C3 side, our nonprofit side. But there's a lot of insights from the political space, and I'm very excited to be able to share them with you today. I want to start with a theory of coalition building that first looks at where funding comes from and the type of coalition work. We're going to get into the weeds on this, folks, but top level, coalitions are there because we need other organizations, not individuals. Individuals is support, it's advocacy, it's activism. But coalitions are about organizations. We need other organizations to help us move our funding formula forward. And there's three different lenses through which organizations, agencies, stakeholder groups, the systems that help run the rest of society interface with us, and we interface with them. Coalitions that are funding focused take a couple of different visages, and our relationships are different depending on who we're trying to be a partner with. When we talk about political solutions, it might be the funding formula for your city, it might be the budget for your state, it might be whatever's going on in Congress. Shared values drive our politics. However, our programmatic partners are looking at the alignments among vision that we have for people and for place, and donors are aligned with us. The conversations that we have with donors are driven by our common mission, again, for people or for place. I'm bringing this up at the beginning because I don't know exactly what you're thinking about doing in terms of working with other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups. If it's a political solution that you're looking for, if it's a programmatic opportunity that you're looking to leverage, or if it's an opportunity to talk with donors and funders and philanthropy in a new way in order to advance that mission that you have. Either or all three are operative at a time like this when we're talking about coalitions. But I want to make sure that I'm helping you surface as you're listening to the rest of this webinar what the situation is for you in particular. So theory of library funding, that's nice. Theory of coalitions. Again, coalitions are about organizations and agencies, stakeholder groups. It's not about individual actors or activists or advocates. Individuals, even small groups of individuals, are really a different mode of behavior. Coalitions are, again, about the systems, the organizations that serve the same populations you do, the agencies that are, like you, part of government, or stakeholder groups that are intentionally aligned in one way, shape, or form with a mission, a vision, or a values-driven alignment with your institution. So the institutional nature of the theory of coalition means that coalitions are formal alliances between these different groups and these different institutions that look at shared objectives. Again, we're not talking about humans. We're talking about, of course, the humans who run these organizations, groups, or institutions. But these coalitions that I'm talking about are not programmatic. They don't concern themselves with the operations of the library. They don't concern themselves with services like interlibrary loan or reading programs or kind of the day-to-day prosaic stuff. They instead are looking at funding or affecting policy changes that benefit the library, of course, but more importantly, the community you serve or the community where you're residing. I'm not talking about programmatic opportunities here. In fact, I'm going to caution you against thinking about programmatic partners. Funding and policy are changed by coalitions. Coalitions that are focused on funding and policy, again, not programs and services, And it's based, again, in that shared values, common mission, or aligned vision framework. Because what we want to do in these kind of contexts is have a true ownership framework where we're creating and co-creating a new future with our coalition partners, again, about policy or about funding. Policies get changed because of coalitions. It's a bit of a truism, but it stands in opposition to the idea that programmatic things like a reading fair, like a literacy event, like a event that helps seniors register to vote. The programming is committee work. Yes, you can be in a committee with a number of different coalition partners, especially at the city or neighborhood level. But when we want to change the law, when we want to change the budget, it's a coalition approach as opposed to a committee that's trying to put on a nice summer fair that's got a reading theme to it. The other reason that we want to spend time in coalition rather than just programmatic focus across partners is that the library is very easily dismissed as a special interest group if you don't have an outside validator. Outside validation comes from a couple of different places. We've got other webinars about the social graph and sort of the heuristics of how decision making is made. But we don't want you to be a special interest group when you're actually standing along with other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups who care about the same people or care about the same place that you call home. Coalitions are always among equals. And this is an important bit of insight, if I may say this. Library leaders sometimes go to Rotary Club meetings and talk about all the great things that the library does, with the idea that we have some things for other Rotarians to use for their business or for their groups or for their organizations, and they should come and use the stuff at the library. That posture of service is exemplar. It's beautiful. It's one of the reasons I support library leaders and libraries, and yet it doesn't actually allow you to function properly as a coalition partner. We have to either level ourselves up or drop the feeling that we're somehow or another not equal. We have to be in a coalition environment as an equal. We have dignity and purpose. We have some really strong assets, including staff and facilities, the ability to tax, the ability to bring in grant money through our C3 partners and directly. We have a portfolio that changes lives and transforms communities. That's not us in a posture of service. Perhaps when we're there at a Rotary Club meeting or another kind of context, we should be thinking of ourselves more as a peer organization rather than as a service provider for those groups. There are only two kinds of coalitions. I mentioned earlier there are three reasons that partnerships are driven. It's either common cause, it's a common mission, aligned vision, or shared values. But there's only really two coalition types that are out there. Coalitions are beautiful because they allow you to advance your own agenda by making it part of somebody else's agenda. And what agenda does the coalition live within? It's an agenda about population. It's a common concern for a population, or it's a common concern about a place that you call home. Sometimes I look at the place as an ideal also. The idealized concepts around this place. What kind of place do we want to have? But how do we want to serve our neighbors? How do we want to serve our neighborhood? Are fundamentally the kinds of coalitions that libraries get involved in mostly. It's important to have distinctions between those two, and there's some significant reasons as to why. Common concern for a population is less about where you live and more about who lives there and what's wrong for them. What challenges are they facing? How can we best show up to support them? The common concern for a population coalition is, again, with organizations and agencies and stakeholder groups who have that same concern, that they serve the same population. The posture of service that those organizations have, they might be a social service organization that addresses people directly in moments of need or crisis. They might be an early education agency who wants to make sure that every kid's ready for pre-K, through pre-K, and to be ready to go to school. They might be groups that have an understanding that senior citizens or people looking for work or people who are new to the community, people in moments of transition and crisis, these are all direct services organizations like the library is. And you have two visages. You have direct services, and then you have community anchor institution, which is why we've got two different types of coalitions. But the coalitions that are with direct services organizations have a different flavor and feeling, a different set of potential outcomes. They are somehow distinct from those ones that are focused on place, um, because they are perhaps driven more by compassion and systems thinking than they are about pride of place. Common cause coalitions, however, which are about place or ideas, are formed when groups, associated organizations rally around that specific issue or localized concern. Meaning, let's say it's livability, it's beautification, it is transportation networks that aren't just about helping people who can't afford their own car move around town, but it's about the way that roads and sidewalks and trails all interlink a community again into that livable place. The opportunity for libraries to participate where the primary bond of the coalition is that shared issue or focus on pride of place is not mutually exclusive. You don't lose your dignity of purpose when serving a population by joining a coalition that's about these systems that impact the livability, the terroir, the character of our hometowns. They're different, and they are very important, both in their own ways. If we look at the common concern for a population, there's a lot of different stakeholder groups, organizations, and agencies that are already working on these issues in your hometown, in your city, your county, across the state of Utah. The new to town groups, people who are homebound, different ages and stages of families, folks at different moments of transition in their lives. It is a truth. It is a truth that you are already serving. Who else is serving those populations as the core, not just of service providers that you partner with on programmatic activities, but who should you be standing alongside, working with closely, coordinating with in coalition to move the budget or the policy framework for your community and for your state forward. Likewise, there are existing coalition partners already out there. Perhaps there's existing coalitions already that are focused on place or these ideals. Economic development. Everybody should have a hand up instead of a hand out. Workforce. How do we retool for the modern economy? How do we make sure that grade level reading happens? How do we address the COVID slide? All of these different issues that are not focused on individual population services, but are focused again on the way that organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups align around funding and policy issues for the character and nature of the community. Now, I don't want to be too didactic about this. Sometimes we blend one into another a little bit, but fundamentally, are you looking for funding to put in computers, or are you looking for funding to put in people who can do digital navigators? Because the fundamentals there sometimes are about whether or not there's the infrastructure in place with computers, or there's the direct aid providers with the staff. All right, so let's talk about what those aims are that you might be having for your needs within the library to get bigger than just the library's budget. To get bigger than just the library's budget is fundamentally the core of any coalition conversation. If you already have enough of a budget, yes, it probably would be nice that you were talking with other partners in the community about nice issues, or important issues, significant issues. But if you want to change the world a little bit, doing it together, not as a special interest group, but doing it together is the aim of your coalition. Please, when you're thinking about these coalition frameworks, I want to avoid confusing these project partners that you have. If somebody shows up to run a program with you, that doesn't mean they're in a coalition with you necessarily. They might be easily identifiable as someone who should be a coalition partner focused on policy or funding. Likewise, someone who sponsors your activities might not be looking at it from the perspective of leaning into the power. They just might be wanting to show up with a couple of dollars or some volunteerism to help you advance your cause. And let's be sure to criticize our own hope about thinking that because we've had a conversation at a Rotary Club meeting, somebody's already our partner. Do you have at your library the funding, staffing, and authority to act? Do you have the funding, staffing, and authority to realize your mission, vision, and values? Fundamentally, if you cannot move that forward by yourself, or if you need other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups to move it forward in ways that are much more that affect change at a much higher level, then the coalition approach is for you. There are features that you will need, and we need to talk about these features because those features, which are staff, money, the place to do the work, and potentially the collections or technology that you need, you are short right now. You don't have what you need in order to fulfill the mission, realize your vision, or operationalize your values. Let's talk about what the presence of those features, the additions of those features, and the absence of those features do to affect either the populations that you're trying to serve or the systems that you're trying to put in place. If you do not have the ability to articulate why funding needs to go to these particular features, we need to spend some time. And part of our work here with the Utah State Library is to make sure that we're helping you think this through in person. We'd be very happy to interface with you on these different things. How does a feature, and with all due respect, any particular position at the library, the people thing is a feature, the same way that the building is a feature, because without that smart, able, capable, compassionate professional who's in place, we can't get the thing done. And then as we think through the coalition approach, where do we sit in relation to the issue that we're trying to find new funding or new policy partners around? Is the library itself a core part of your community, or are you a complement to other parts of community life and community success? This is an important moment of self-reflection for any library leadership team. If you are currently a core component of delivering a particular service for a population or standing up a particular system in your community, that's one truth. It's not better or worse than being a complement to other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups who support community vitality and community life, or the success of the community in different ways through systems. Whichever one is true is where you start your conversations about either building or joining a coalition, though, because if you are pretending that you're core to the community, but actually you stand alongside a lot of other groups as a complement, let's say that you're not the only group in town doing early literacy services, then we have to approach our potential coalition partners with some professional humility. We might want to talk about ourselves as core, that the library is a transformational force does not obviate the idea that we can be complementary as well as core. Whatever the truth is for your library is the strength point that you stand on. And understanding that means that you can be in proper coalition around funding and around policy, either in front, alongside, or in support of this common set of goals. The other component of preparatory work, as it were, is being able to articulate very clearly what the features do, the features that we discussed 2 slides ago, in either a core or complementary way, to be able to define what your expected and hoped for outcomes are for having those features enhanced. And the feature might be stronger partnerships, it might be solo work. And to define also what happens if you cannot do the work. What happens to those people that are the core of your common concern coalition? What happens to the town that you love, the town that you're invested in for those common concern coalitions? Your presence or absence, the reason that you're asking for the funding, and if you've been with me through the rest of this series for the Utah State Library, you know what I'm talking about here already. Plan A. We're asking for the funding, we're asking for the authority so that we can do certain things. And Plan B means that we won't have it. We can't do the work. We're not capable or able to our fullest extent. We have to have these things in mind before we begin to approach other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups to either build or join a coalition. We lack real strength if all we're doing is showing up trying to build awareness about our current programs, our current service points. What happens if we have the right kind of partnerships, the right kind of alignments, the right kind of funding and authority to act? What happens if we, together with our organization, agency, and stakeholder group partners, don't? What happens to the people? the people that both of your organizations and all the organizations that are in that coalition serve if you're more successful? What happens to the place that you call home if the project moves forward? And again, what are the negative effects? Who do you leave behind? What do we leave on the table if the shared mission of that coalition is not able to meet those needs? Articulating this is a vital component of saying, why do we want to spend the time? Why do we want to make the effort? Why do we want to go through the labor and potentially the heartache of doing coalition work and not just going it alone? What happens is a real key driver from a management perspective and a leadership perspective here. All right, so you've gotten through to that point with this framework around coalition work. And then you want to take a look internally at what are the assets that you need to put in place. Right now, you have the first key asset, I hope, in place right now, which is your strategic plan or your buildings plan or your technology plan or just your plain old everyday budget. The book that you have that carries your values, what's our value system? Is our value system reflected in the budget for our city, for our state, for the country? What's our vision for these people that we're serving in this place we call home? What's the mission we're on to transform and to change lives? All of that should already be baked into the work that you're trying to do and the organizational alignments that you've got. Articulating then, why do you think or feel or believe or hope that other organizations, agencies, and stakeholder groups will care about your big goals in your plans? And then the argument. This is the hard part, folks, sometimes, to make an argument that says the library is the right organization, the correct organization, the appropriate organization, or the most able organization to be a partner in that coalition context. Again, it's not just the direct services, it's the stature that your library has to move the funding formula or the policy agenda forward. Why should your library have a seat at that table? And why should these other organizations care enough to incorporate the library's particular version of the common cause, the particular solutions to that common concern into that big coalition? And then we always want to spend some time in preparatory work looking at, well, if common cause and common concern coalitions are based on the question of who else cares like you do, how much do you care? How much does your staff team really care? Or your board for that matter? But I like starting with staff because you're the ones who have to interact and enact. Why are you a librarian or a library worker? Fundamentally, it's a core question. It's a staff meeting question. It's the basis of intersection points with other people who work in agencies like yours, which are part of government, who staff organizations that are serving populations or places that are taking the time to get together and do the labor as a stakeholder group. What's the intersection point of why do you do the work? Because they do the work too. And then what are your personal values about libraries as a staff group, as individuals? What are your personal values about working in a library? Again, we're trying to find places to articulate our points of intersection because we are the only experts in libraries. Why do we care enough? How is your work an expression of your value system? What problems do you enjoy trying to solve for the community and for families or individuals? I would like to always do this inventory in order to help the staff team be able to articulate adequately and accurately when they sit down across the table from somebody who's also doing literacy or also doing early childhood or also doing senior services or also doing economic development or also doing one of the many, many, many things that public libraries do. Why is our role unique? Maybe particular, certainly, because it's library work, a little peculiar too. All right, then to the meat of it all. Are we going to join a coalition or are we going to start a coalition? And I want to give you just some good coaching and some good advice, I hope, about what both joining a coalition looks like and starting a coalition looks like from the perspective of avoiding mistakes. There are 9 characteristics of functioning existing coalitions for you to take a look at to potentially join. I know that the name of this webinar is Building a Library Coalition, but let's look at stuff that already exists. If you've been isolated and alone, who else is already doing the work? Can you get involved in that coalition so you don't have to reinvent the wheel? But for that coalition to be functional and to be worth your time, you need to do some evaluation ahead of time. Is there a clear ask to potential members? Meaning that if I want to become part of this coalition, I want to bring my library to it, what is the ask that the coalition has of me? Is there a buy-in for us to participate? Do we need to commit to a certain amount of time or money? In your own professional opinion, folks, is that coalition organized for success? Does it look like it's going to actually do the thing it says it's trying to do? Are there goals and definitions for success and for failure that it's published, or can it articulate that in a conversation amongst the leadership? And do they have functioning groups within itself to get it done? Are there roles for your organization as a particular kind of potential member? Do they want you to do something other than just put your name on the letterhead? Are they functional about the communications that they have, both internally to partners as well as externally, about their successes and failures? Is there a budget for the coalition at all? Are they just doing volunteer labor, which is fine, but let's talk about it. And do they look like a duck, walk like a duck, and quack like a duck? And that's extremely important, because if you're going to commit to an existing coalition, you're going to commit not only your time and your resources, but your library's good name. Finding an existing coalition might be the most easy thing for you to do coming out of this webinar. You're thinking to yourself, gosh, getting something together just for the library seems kind of daunting. That's fine. Let's add the library to an existing coalition that's already focused on a population that you already serve. Let's add the library to an existing coalition that's already focused on that place you call home. Finding that group might be difficult, though, because if you've been isolated, how do you break your isolation? Well, I always ask myself, well, where do the cool kids hang out? Where do your partners already hang out? Are they already talking somewhere? What groups do they already belong to? And have you previously turned down an invitation because you didn't have the time? It's interesting how the library does get approached, and then it doesn't get approached anymore if we haven't been showing up. It's a leadership challenge, I would suggest, and one that I want to encourage good leaders to consider and also obviate. There are systems within your community that already exist that I'm confident that you could identify, where there are natural partnerships, again, based on the common concern for populations or common cause for that community, and that there sometimes are coalitions that are built because other people like you are frustrated with how things are going already. And there's a number of different words for coalition besides coalition. I've been using coalition and partnership a little bit interchangeably. Those are true, but so is a board or a commission, something that has the force of government behind it, an early childhood advisory board, a commission on the homeless. Is there a council on early childhood literacy? Is there a task force about maternal and child health? Is there a forum that gets together regularly to discuss the big ideas around policy for the economic well-being of a particular region of your state? Are there caucuses that look at population services, everything from new to the community to returning to the community? Are there initiatives that are out there that are looking for programmatic partners initially, and then want to move into that policy and funding framework? Likewise, alliances that are aligned again around success. These synonyms here are, well, it's important for you to take a little bit of time and to look around and to see that there is a place, based on these rubrics that we've been discussing today so far, for the library to bring its power, to bring its opportunity, to bring its concerns, and its very competent and capable staff, the facilities that you have, the collections, the technology, and the current funding formula that you've got. It's very interesting how few coalitions that have these different visages, the boards and commissions and councils and caucuses and alliances, have participation by libraries around the country. I think it is to our detriment that we do not participate in those systems. If you're doing it already, wonderful. I want to give you a gold star at this point in the webinar. If you're not, let's lean in together and think through how do we bring you, your staff, and your boards into these kind of conversations. Do the coalition's priorities, those existing coalitions, align with your library priorities? If not, they are disqualified. I'm not suggesting you join everything willy-nilly. Can your library benefit from this partnership? And that self-interested question is one that a peer organization would ask, not a service organization. You serve plenty of people, plenty of causes that you don't benefit from, but a coalition, you need to. And you have to understand whether or not that coalition, that partnership, that board, that commission, that alliance, that initiative, that forum, is there conflicts or issues that are potentially a problem for you based on your priorities and their priorities? I'm not asking you to join things that are uncomfortable or are going to cause problems for you. That level of evaluation is very important before you commit to any existing coalition. Let's say, though, that there's nothing to commit to, and you want to create a coalition that's around the issues that you care about or the populations that you serve, this place that you call home. Some of the characteristics of a coalition, now there's 6 that we can spend some time with you on doing much more of a business plan for. But fundamentally, top level, every good coalition has a clear ask to potential members. What is the problem? What is the solution that you're trying to focus on? What is a buy-in for that ask? The second component of a new coalition is that you have to identify leadership. What are the key organizations that would be the wish list, if you will, for being part of this? And if there are opportunities for junior partners to be involved rather than all leaders, who can lend their name to it without having to do the labor of running a coalition? You need an org chart and an organizational structure for that coalition before you start trying to invite people to it. What are the committees? What are the roles for each organization? There are different committee. There's a lot of different groups within this. There's everything from media and PR to fundraising to developing research to writing white papers. I mean, there's some tremendous things that need to get done to develop a coalition. What are the internal protocols going to be for the leadership group of that coalition? What's the infrastructure that needs to be in place in order to accomplish that? The place that coalitions go to die is when they don't talk to each other, the groups that are inside the coalition. Communications with external stakeholders, media, and the public. Who are you targeting with your activities around funding or around policy? Understanding what has to get done by the coalition, but also what are the levers of power that have to be changed or pushed against in order to make change happen. And then what's the budget for the coalition? The money budget sometimes has to happen. Sometimes you have to hire staff for it. Sometimes it's volunteer run. What's the time commitment, not only for your organization as the enactor of it or the mover or the leader, but for anyone who wants to buy in? And what builds dignity and purpose and the good name of that coalition most quickly, most effectively, most authentically? There's a few things that I want to make sure that anyone who wants to think through starting their own coalition does from day one. Our pro tip environment here is that you have to not only define success and failure, but you have to be emotionally prepared for failure, because coalitions don't move quickly necessarily. Coalitions are not immediately successful all the time. And there's often times where you have to regroup, come back, retrench based on your value system, your vision, and your mission, your shared frameworks for that, your aligned frameworks for that, your common frameworks for that. What is it? Can we weather failure? The expectations of insiders in coalition building are what I like to say inversely correlated to the likelihood of success. We sometimes get together and say, we can change the world. And we really should be much more realistic, because again, it's iterative. If we're talking about funding, we have to change budgets for cities, for counties, for states, for the federal government, that takes a tremendous amount of work. And if we're trying to change policy, when the policies have not been appropriate to the people we're trying to serve, or this place we call home, for generations, we want to make sure that any new coalition has a series of small victories early in the process, either through things that you're trying to accomplish, or events that are taking place, in order to make everybody who's in the coalition feel like we're making progress. It's a pro tip. It's very important. It's part of the human nature, it's part of the emotional life of these coalitions. The other thing to be prepared for when you're trying to put a coalition together is that you will not get back as much as you give. That the stakeholders that are part of it, that have said, yes, I want to be a part of this thing, we're leaning in, we're giving it our all, are gonna disappoint you a little bit. And I'm okay with that. We do this work all around the country all the time. When they don't show up, what do you do? And how do you encourage folks who should be a key stakeholder in that coalition to be active participants? But when you put something together like this, you're not going to have everyone say, John, I want to join your coalition. What a wonderful idea, John. I'm joining your coalition. I hadn't thought of it before. We're signing on today. That doesn't happen as frequently as I would like to suggest that it could. What you're going to hear when you offer a pathway for some organization or another agency or a stakeholder group to be a participant in this funding or policy focused coalition, you're going to hear from a lot of people, John, I like what you're doing with this. Keep me informed. Great. They've opted in. They want you to inform them, keep them informed, put a newsletter together. John, I support what you're doing at the library. I like this coalition idea a lot. You know, how can I help? All right, great. They don't necessarily want to be a part of the coalition, but they want to do something with it. Low-level activities, low-level ways to sign on. If they don't want to be a part of the steering committee, they want to be a junior organization, how can I help? You can lend us your good name. You can endorse our early activity. You can come to some meetings occasionally, but then you're finally going to hear from people, yes, John, I love what you're doing. I want to be identified with what you're doing. Put them on the steering committee. Put them all the way in. If they want to lend their identity, that it's their values, vision, their mission, their good name. If they want to lend their identity to this coalition and be there as an equal, then what you've got is a functioning, holistic opportunity to start moving that policy and that budgetary framework forward. All right, folks, this has been a high-level conversation. I hope it's been an interesting conversation for you. We're here to help as a component of our work with the Utah State Library. We'd very much like to be in conversation with you, both to evaluate the existing landscape, to evaluate how your current team can participate, or to even dream big and to put this new library coalition idea to work. Thanks so much for today.